Now to get into the tough question. Is it an emotion you're feeling or a mood that you're in? Let's find out. Feelings are a short-term emotional reaction to events that generate limited arousal. In other words, feelings don't hang on usually for weeks and months and years. Feelings are kind of a short burst. They're kind of riding that wave of adrenaline, or they're riding the overall moment, and then they fade. Sometimes we really wish we could hang on to them for a long period of time, like the intense feeling of immediate love. Well, love can start out as a feeling, but then it can become a mood when you're around the person for a period of time. Such as moods are low intensity states such as boredom, contentment. Contentment, we think of that with love. Grouchiness, serenity, another aspect of love. So sometimes we'll use a term or a word to label something that can be applied to either a feeling or to a mood. But in this case, what we basically need to take from this is that feelings are normally short-term, rapid burst, and moods are long-term things. You can have a mood for a day, a week, a month, a year, a decade. You can have a mood that lasts a long period of time. Types of emotions. Now, of course, moods and feelings are all tied back to our emotions. We have as you can see in front of you, a wheel that ties the primary or basic emotions. When they sat down in psychology and they sat down with communication and sociology and all these other sciences, they said, well, we have to agree that there's some basic moods and emotions that we all share. Our feelings, moods, they all tie into emotions. Excitement, tender, scared, angry, sad, happy. These are all ones that has been agreed upon that everyone experiences to some degree. Now, the intensity is what's important. With those 6 agreed upon emotions, we have some agreed upon intensity. We can be annoyed, then we become angry, then we become furious. We are pensive, and then we're sad, and then we're grieving. We're content, and then we're happy, and then we're ecstatic. We're anxious, and then we're afraid, and then we're terrified. We like someone, we love someone, we adore them. But then there are things that we can't scale. And even in the scaling process, we're not even sure how it fits in there. If we're disgusted, it's hard to become more disgusted or greaterly disgusted or disgustingly disgusted. Basically, we only have one word. This is important in communication. Sometimes in expressing emotions, we run out of words to describe it. And so we overuse things. Awesome wasn't the one that we used a lot. But if everything is awesome, then what is awesomely awesome about awesome? Those type of things. We see that where if we overuse something, it no longer carries the weight. If every time we encounter someone, we say they're furious when we're meaning they're annoyed, then our wording changes and how we communicate with that person changes as well. So we lose value in our words when we overuse them. Influence on emotional expression. So we've found those 6 that we're all experiencing. If we have words for them, we experience them in different degrees. If it's like disgust, well, it's disgusting. It's gross. Oh, I found another word. Anyway, we have certain things that influence this. Our personality. You know, we've all seen the movies or the TV shows where the person refuses to curse. Well, that's going to limit how they express some of their emotions. If they can't just and a line of curse words come out, instead they say, gosh darn, golly gee whiz, I'm upset. Well, that's not as effective. So our personality can change how we express our emotions. Gender, Now, this one can be tricky as we get into gender later on. It may just be gender roles that are limiting how we express ourselves, which goes into culture. So we like to think that gender is one of the influences, but it may be the gender role that we're in that changes how we express our emotions. Culture. Some cultures, it's okay. You walk around. If the culture in your family is that you're loud and you just let your mind rip, that's how you're going to express your emotions. I'm mad, I'm going to display it. On the other hand, if you're in a very conservative family that does not express their emotions, you have that tendency to not express your emotions. Social conventions and roles. Western civilization, we tend to act out our emotions rather than express them. This is the one, you come home, you slam the door, you throw your books on the table, you stomp up the stairs, and they say, "Hey, are you mad?" And you look at them and say, "No, I'm not mad," and you stomp away. Well, you've expressed your emotion, but you haven't stated it. And this is something we find in our culture that can be unhealthy, because then the person's left with that emotional contagion and they don't know what to do with it. They're like, "Oh, well, they said they weren't mad, but they were clearly mad. Now I'm feeling mad. And now that I'm mad, I'm going to go make someone else in the community mad, just to prove how mad we truly all are." And that is the reason why sometimes expressing emotions is very beneficial in our communication. Other influences on emotion. Emotional intelligence. People that are not reflective, don't have self-awareness, don't practice social skills, haven't taken this class. They may not have a developed emotional intelligence. They may have instead just everything gets pushed back, everything gets put away. And so they don't actually know what they're feeling. They don't even bother labeling the emotions they're having. They just go around throwing them around everywhere. And it actually hurts them, where they're unable to deal with the emotions. They're unable to build relationships because of the emotions. So we have to have an acute understanding of our emotions, as we've talked about in our self-reflection of chapter 2. See things from other people's perspective. Wait, that's chapter 3. That's right. That's in there too. Adapt for constructively managing our emotions. This is important as well. We need to learn how to express our emotions when we have someone around us that's in that sphere of influence, that we can share those emotions, that we can get those out. And so that way we don't just walk around with an emotional contagion. Capacity for hardiness of the emotional state. This is where emotions is definitely an individual experience. Someone can take a lot of sadness and really deal with it well, but the next person, anything goes wrong and it automatically crushes them. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a case of we all respond differently. It's like a pain threshold. Some people can walk around and have a broken arm for a week. Other person gets a splinter and they have to rush to the emergency room. It's just a different experience for each individual. So when we look to manage our emotions, we have options. We always have options, which is a good thing. We can suppress them. Now, suppressing them, though, we oftentimes hear linked or related to illnesses. We always hear about people, depression is part of it. It might be a physical illness. They always are sick. You often hear of ulcers having some component of suppressing emotions. And normally we're talking about the negative emotions here. But what about if you're suppressing those happy emotions? You're not letting yourself become happy. You're not letting yourself enjoy life. That's bad as well. That can be negative and derogatory for you as well. Venting. Venting is a good thing if you're with the right person. If you have someone in that sphere of influence that you can let go of, that you're not going to automatically infect them with your contagion of mad or sad or whatever, that is a good thing to do. You even hear of groups that go out in the woods and they run around in some clothing, not oftentimes a lot, and they just vent. They're just yelling and they do scream therapy and do all these crazy things. It's actually very beneficial. I've talked to people that have done that, And they said that they come back feeling like they have taken everything that they had balled up and suppressed because of social constraints and just let it go. And by letting it go, they felt better. And some people, we try to prevent emotions. Okay, every time I'm around this person, they make me sad or they make me angry, so I'm going to avoid them. Encounter avoidance. Or, okay, all right, I'm carpooling with this person. I got to drive them to work. But what I'm going to do, because they always complain, the minute they get in the car, they're automatic and complaining, and by the time I get to work, I'm mad. So what I'm going to do is I'm always going to have the sports station on, and I'm going to only talk sports with them. Something like that. So you start structuring it, you know? Or attention focusing. You're not going to pay attention to them. Or you're only going to pay attention to certain aspects of which we'll get into when we talk about listening, because suddenly you're no longer listening to comprehend, you're listening to respond, and so you're just focusing on part of their message. Now, reappraising emotion is what the book and what is really highly recommended, a good way of doing. Because if we can reappraise our emotion that we're experiencing or that we're sharing with others, we can communicate with them better. We have a better time talking to them if we can reappraise our own emotions and sort them out so that we can effectively communicate. In other words, if you're speaking to someone who's making you mad, all right, you can say, well, am I mad at this person or am I mad at their message? If I'm mad at their message, then I need to realize this person's still important to me. I care for them. And so I'm going to listen to their message with the knowledge that I care for them. Reappraising emotions, changing how we think about the meaning of emotion, eliciting situations, so that their emotional impact is changed. And this is one of those, you know, if I have to wait in a line, oh, boy, that makes everyone angry. It makes everyone mad. Standing in line is annoying. Wait a minute. What if it, instead of I looked at it as annoying, I looked at it as a learning opportunity? I'm not standing in line. I'm practicing being patient. And when I get through this line, I'm not going to let this line change who I am. And that can work. It can, if you just reappraise the emotion you're experiencing, you can get through things and get to the other side in a better state. Unhandled emotions. Anger, if unhandled, can cause long-term troubles such as chronic hostility. The person that hates everybody and hates everything in every situation. We encounter this because this is maybe openly expressing your emotion enables you to purge them. Anger can be difficult though. You can't just openly express your anger and expect everyone to get along with you. So instead we have to restructure our anger so we can express it in a beneficial way. Such as in my syllabi, I point out that, hey, if you're mad about a grade, wait 24 hours and then contact me. That 24 hours is a cooling down time so that you can intellectually express the problem rather than express the emotion. Jefferson's strategy, it works sometimes, it doesn't work for everyone, and that's slowly counting down from 10 before you speak or act. Of course, that can also be a trigger for anger in others. When they say something, you go 1, 2, or 10, 9, 8, and they realize you're doing the Jefferson strategy, so they're like, well, that makes me mad that you're mad about what I'm saying. So yes, it needs to be kind of a internal thing. You know, when someone does something that upsets you, take that breath, focus, restructure, and then respond. It'll help your communication. Passion is one that gets so many people in trouble, and it's because it's a blended emotion. It's not just straight up one, it's not just a positive emotion, it's a negative, positive, bad, good emotion. It's a blend of emotions of surprise. You didn't expect to be in this situation, but here you are. Joy, and a number of positive feelings such as excitement, amazement, and attraction. Ooh. Why is it negative? Because what are normally surprises? Surprises normally are based in fear. And so that is your negative. this kind of getting interwoven with all these other exciting things you're feeling. And because it's rooted in surprise, it can cause you trouble. And social influences, there are social influences. People tell you, go look for passion in your life, look for the passion. Well, sometimes when you're looking for passion, it's not a surprise. And so you can't find the passion because you've been influenced to look for it. Now, grief is another emotion. Now, this is the Kubler-Ross model that we normally see with grief. We share grief with people. We have to work through our grief, and there are different stages of grief. The problem is we have a tendency to look at this model and read it from the top down and think that once after we go through shock, oh, check that off. That's done. We'll move on to denial. Oh, all right, we're through denial. Check that off. Anger, oh, we'll check that off. Problem is, it doesn't flow that way. Actually, it's a crazy cycle of stuff. If you ever met someone in grief, they could start off angry and then go into shock and then begin bargaining and then denial. And once after they pass through a stage, they can always go back to it. You know, they could wake up the next morning and be grief-stricken again, and just the shock of waking up alone after 60 years of marriage, and that's a new shock every day. So all these are important aspects to realize in grief, but realize when you're communicating with someone in grief, there's going to be some things you want to do and some things you don't want to do. One thing is, don't start checking off the boxes. Oh, well, you've already been through anger. Let's move on to bargaining, shall we? And then we'll see how we're doing with it. No, just let the person express themselves and whatever stage they currently are in the moment. Comforting others, engaging in supportive communication. These are guidelines. I don't always recommend going out there and comforting, finding people to comfort. Some people, you have to have that relationship. You have to be in that sphere of influence. And you have to kind of realize where you are in that sphere of influence to realize if you're going to help or if you can hurt. Sometimes people will seek out people that are on the far fringes of that sphere of influence because they feel able to express themselves. We're seeing this with computers, believe it or not. People can talk to a computer versus a person because the computer is not judgmental, and they feel anything they say isn't going to be repeated. And so there's actually been apps created for grief counseling that are very effective because the person doesn't ever feel like they're going to be judged. But if you do end up in a situation where you're trying to comfort others, make sure the person's ready to talk and don't force them to talk. It has to be the right place and right time. Basically, if someone says, I don't want to talk about it, say, all right, but if you do, I'm here for you. And leave it at that. Because if you start pressing them, well, you need to let this out, you need to get through this. First of all, most of us aren't therapists. And we don't have the degree or the training or the knowledge to deal with some situations that we might force a person to expose themselves with. So just be a friend or be a spouse, be someone there for them. Ask good questions. And if they express anything about suicide, for me, that's automatically, let's go talk to a professional. Don't ever take it as a joke. Don't ever lighten it. Always take it as a true concern. Legitimize, don't minimalize. In other words, if a person is going through the grief of loss of a pet, don't say, well, I lost my pet, and so I understand where you're coming from. That's minimalizing their experience. Instead, go with, okay, so tell me about how you're feeling about the loss of this pet. Legitimize it. Give their feelings strength, not insert yours. Listen actively. That means the nodding the head. Yeah, I understand. I see. Okay. And repeating back. So you're saying this dog was very close to you and you got this dog at a very bad time of your life and they really helped you. Boom. You're legitimizing. You're listening actively. Don't go overboard on the advice. You know, oftentimes the best advice is what you're doing is you're listening. Your best advice is letting them vent, letting them express themselves. And show concern and give praise, you know. Like with that pet, you know, that pet was very lucky to have you. And you had some wonderful moments And it's really, really great that you were there for them. It's praise. It's simple to do. So in this chapter, we talked about emotions. Emotions will come up again. As I mentioned, gender roles is going to come up when we're talking about culture and gender in just a couple chapters. And we have a lot of information here to cover and unpack. So we talked about the nature of emotions, if it's a feeling or a mood. Feelings, short-term, quick burst, boom. Moods, not such a burst, but just kind of something goes on. So it lasts a while. Types of emotion, we talked about the 6 of those. Emotional influences, as we just spoke about, and living a happy life. We also talked about grief, but let's get to that last one. This comes from Will Smith. Life is good because I decided to make it that way. Find what is good in life. We create joy, we don't find it, and promote positive relationships that you're in. And on this second part, go ahead and answer any of these questions. Answer about, what you think, hey, maybe this is a better word for disgust, more disgusting. Or what about times that you felt an emotion and you weren't able to express it? Or a time that someone helps you, by venting. Any of those type of things. Share something about emotions in this next section. I'll be thrilled, and I will see you on Monday.